The Cats draw first blood in Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final, but we're taking a look on the Monday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast at why the Edmonton Oilers should have maybe had that one. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to talk to y'all about game number 2.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Shout out to the everydayers. Happy Monday. Thank you for holding us down and making us your first listen every single day. It's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone, back once again for a solo episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I hope y'all took in Saturday night's Game 1 Masterclass from Sergei Bobrovsky, but there's a lot of different angles to be covered here, and I'm ready to go. Fantasy impact, same game parlay breakdown. I'm going to take a look at some longer shots on the Conn Smythe odd board. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 wager. That's $200 you could be betting with bonus bets with any $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Apologies, my friends, for the last couple of days. I know I promised a lot of Stanley Cup Final takes on Friday, dealt with a little bit of Wi-Fi issues up north last week, up and down. The picks were here and there. We're back in a big way for this week. Steele's back from Italia tomorrow. Excited to have my boy back on the ones and twos. Game 1 was a beauty, though, if you're a Florida Panthers fan, and I know they probably got lucky. There's going to be angles that I cover on today's show after the break. I'm going to get to Carter Verhaeghe, some Conn Smythe odds. Obviously, tonight's Game 2 same-game parlay. Got some juicy picks for you. The Edmonton Oilers played a sensational game. I'm not here for the take that they got goalied because part of playoff hockey is having to deal with hot goaltenders. Adin Hill was one of the reasons the Vegas Golden Knights did it just a year ago. Sergei Bobrovsky turned his Stanley Cup performance from last year already around in one game. Last postseason, he got shelled by the Vegas Golden Knights. I know he was rocking with a save percentage south of 900. He was sensational in Game 1, and I know that's what everyone's talking about, but it's how he went about his business. I talked about him last week being a very cerebral, unflappable kind of goaltender, and he proved just that in Game 1 because unlike a lot of his first 10 or 11 games in the postseason. By the way, he's rocking with 11 out of 13 of the last postseason games with 2 or less goals. But a lot of that credit has to also go to the team in front of him, who had really done an amazing job of keeping a lot of the chances and shots at a peripheral length. Game 1, the Oilers were all over the ice. Connor McDavid had a number of good chances weaving into the zone. Zach Hyman blows an unreal chance. And these are golden also power play opportunities that the Edmonton Oilers were not missing out on through the first 3 rounds of this postseason. Again, these are all angles that have been covered, but when it comes down to how Bobrovsky got it done, he was really not giving up much of that cage. The Edmonton Oilers were trying to go lateral on him. He was all over the ice, and if Sergei Bobrovsky is able to turn in even one more of those performances in this series, and the Florida Panthers take this cup, he's a Hall of Famer. He cements himself, in my opinion, as a Hall of Fame goaltender. And when I looked at his numbers the other day, I think it's really not that bold of a take. He's got 2 Vezina trophies under his belt. He is now, with that shutout, he has 3 postseason shutouts in his career. He has 44 regular season shutouts, a .915 career save percentage in the regular season, a 2-time All-Star. He turns in another one of those performances, and they steal another game or 2 and this Stanley Cup. I'll talk about the Edmonton Oilers a little bit more in detail in a second, but Sergei Bobrovsky obviously off the top of this episode after that performance he turned in is going to get some love. And a lot of people were talking about Sergei Bobrovsky only a couple of seasons ago. There was, I forget the goalie, was it Spencer? Not Spencer Knight. Anyway, one of the goalies in Florida that were nipping at his heels for playing time a couple of years ago. There was question marks around his health. Had he seen too much time in the cage? The price tag on his salary. His salary is worth every single dollar and then some over the last couple of seasons. So it's kind of interesting how he's turned it around and honestly salvaged his fantasy value back to a point where he is now an elite option. And when you look at him headed into next year, is he going to be able to replicate what he's done in this postseason? Probably not. That might be too tall of a task. However, this Florida Panthers team is going to run back a very good portion of this team. I know Brandon Montour is going to look for some money. There's also some contracts out there. Sam Reinhart is going to want his money. They're going to be another good team. And looking at Bob from the fantasy angle, I just had to come on here and say, don't sleep on him going into next season's fantasy draft as well. He had 6 shutouts this season to lead the league, 36, 17, and 4, and a .915 save percentage, which is ironically right on the button for his entire career average. So he gets some love. The Edmonton Oilers, though, were all over the ice at certain points of that game, especially in the first period where they came out like a house of fire, 12 shots to 4, second period, 13 shots to 8. And then obviously it levels off much more into the third period and they put the chokehold on it. But I think Biznassi was calling it like a python hold or something. Anyway, when you look into the numbers a little bit deeper, and yes, I really do think that if the Edmonton Oilers continue to play the game that they did in game 1, for the most part, that they are going to convert a lot more of those chances than they'll miss. However, they need to be better in the faceoff dot. They only won 40% of their faceoffs to 59% for this Florida Panthers team. That puck possession side of things, that's not going to be nearly good enough if the Edmonton Oilers are going to get what they need offensively out of their big guns. If they don't have the puck, they're not scoring goals. And when you're losing the faceoffs at that kind of a clip, that will catch up to you. The rest of the episode, I hope, catches up to y'all in the same fashion, bringing you the angles from game 1. I got some keys to game 2, including an obvious one that the Edmonton Oilers need to convert on the power play and the Florida Panthers need to be much more disciplined. Those might be obvious ones, but they hold true, especially at this time of year. Man, I sound like a broken record, but that's what we're going to keep doing until the Stanley Cup is lifted. We're also going to keep breaking down fantasy angles. I know I teased the top 20 D-men last week. I didn't come through for y'all. I need my boy Steele back for that one. We'll do that later in this week. We got some big-time special guests coming up. Make sure you drop us that 5-star review. Smash the subscribe button on YouTube. Leave us some comments, feedback. It means the world to us. It really does help us get better and feed you guys what you need to know headed into next fantasy draft season. However, you know, we got to show some love to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook because today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more, and you can bet on it all at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get that $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right now, $200 you can use to bet on everything from the finals MVP to who hits a dinger right out of the park. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add another big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, you know that's America's #1 sportsbook. Again, my friends, apologies for a little bit of an up and down end of last week, some solo episodes. I know I promised that top 20. That's coming. Steele's back in the booth with me for tomorrow's episode, and we'll be breaking down fantasy angles, the rest of the Stanley Cup Final, of course. And then we got to get into some very serious draft preparation. We're going to look at the keeper dynasty side of things. We're going to look at players that you must add, must drop, young guns on the rise. You know I'm all about that under the radar angle. And speaking of which, there are a number of unsung under the radar type players for the Florida Panthers that Bill Zito has acquired over the last couple of years. You know, even, back a number of seasons this year, most recently, players like Evan Rodriguez. I know Tarasenko has been a stud for a number of years, but just kind of guys that just go about their business and chip in when necessary. Evan Rodriguez did it in game 1, and right down to Carter Verhaeghe, who, I've come on to this show and spoken a lot about Carter Verhaeghe, but he needs some more respect. He's leading the team with 10 goals. He gets his 10th goal on Saturday. He's tied with Wyatt Johnston and Leon Draisaitl for the second most in the postseason, only trailing Zach Hyman. And he just needs some more respect on his name. And when I was alluding to those Conn Smythe odds, I know Barkov on there and Bob ahead of him. And when you look at the odd board, they're obviously up there at plus 340 for Barkov, plus 220 for Bob. at plus 1,900 for Carter Verhaeghe. If he continues to score big goals like that, that is some juicy value that cannot be denied. Carter Verhaeghe also going into next season. If you weren't on this podcast and hearing me say this over the last 2 seasons already, you need a guy like Carter Verhaeghe on your team. He brings the shots. He brings the elite goal totals. He is a responsible player. He chips in on the peripherals. I think he is in line for another big season after 2 back-to-back sensational years. So when it comes to the Florida Panthers getting it done, you know I have to come out here and on this show and talk about Carter Verhaeghe for at plus 1,900. Yeah, that's getting a little bit of attention from me. Speaking of which, the Panthers are now cool, calm, and collected headed into tonight for Game 2. Sergei Bobrovsky becomes the oldest goaltender to get a Stanley Cup Final shutout. I mentioned if he wins this bad boy, he is going to be a Hall of Famer. But Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci for the Edmonton Oilers, this is one of my keys headed into tonight in Game 2. They need to be a lot better. And given how much money Darnell Nurse makes, look, they got burned for the 2 goals that sunk this team. I'm not going to count the empty netter there. That was a 2-0 final, even though the third one does count. Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci. This Florida Panthers team is on you in a heartbeat. They get the puck into the zone. They get the puck on net very quickly, and they're relentless on the forecheck. That is bad news for some slow-footed D-men in Ceci and Darnell Nurse that need to get it done in Game 2, especially Darnell Nurse now, who I think is rocking something ugly like a -15 in this postseason. Will the Edmonton Oilers likely capitalize on those chances if they continue to get these high-danger chances like they did on Saturday night? Most likely. But in their own end, they are going to need to get a whole lot more out of that pairing because Matthias Ekholm cannot play the entire game. That's number one. Number two, 76% of teams that win Game 1 go on to win the Cup, and I believe it's something like 83 or 84% of teams that win Game 1 at home go on to win the Cup. So all the pressure here in Game 2 is clearly on the Edmonton Oilers. The Panthers, like I mentioned, cool, calm, collected, just like their goaltender, just like their head coach. Bob struggled last Stanley Cup. He already has proven that he is out there to turn that narrative around. I mentioned everything about how he kind of turned his whole career around. The Oilers didn't make many mistakes, but the ones that they did, especially Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci, the Panthers pounced on. So then you kind of sprinkle in the face-off numbers. You sprinkle in how responsible they are in their own end, the relentlessness on the forecheck. And the Edmonton Oilers are going to have to throw the kitchen sink at Sergei Bobrovsky in Game 2. I'm not saying run a goaltender. I'm not out here to play dirty hockey. They're going to need to get in his bonnet. They're going to need to get a lot of pucks on net. And they're going to need to generate even more, maybe not more scoring chances, but they are going to need to capitalize on the scoring chances that they get. And right around the break today, like I said, my friends, super short episode. I'm going to talk about my same game parlay and break it down. I got it up right here. The quality chances from the Edmonton Oilers are going to play into it. You know, Connor McDavid is going to respond. Look, the Oilers went through David Riddick and Cam Talbot. Then they dealt with Artur Shilovs. And no disrespect to Jake Ottinger, but he doesn't have the track record and the resume of Sergei Bobrovsky. So maybe this is going to be one of those things that the Oilers really are going to, even though we saw such elite play from them in the first 3 rounds, they're going to need to find another gear here. This is the Stanley Cup, and all of those angles that I mentioned in terms of the Florida Panthers being a cool, confident, and calm and collected, a lot of C adjectives in there. They are also a team that's experienced. That was there last year, and they're hungry. They're back in the same spot. This Edmonton Oilers group hasn't been there together. And I know that they've been on a number of deep runs over the last number of seasons, but going to the Stanley Cup is obviously a different beast. You know, the Florida penalty kill snuffs out the attack. They're going to need to be more disciplined headed into tonight. This is what happens when you get a hot goaltender, but that is what goes down in this time of year for hockey. It's going to be another battle tonight. Game 2, back in Florida. Do the Edmonton Oilers respond? Hit me in the comments. Let me know what you think. Make sure you check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast Instagram account, posting daily content, info, some of our bets. You know where we're making those bets already, to shout out to FanDuel, but I got a same game parlay coming up right after the break. And shout out to everyone for holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. Steele's back in the booth with me tomorrow. I can't wait. I hope the trip overseas was a beaut for the boy. And I hope that we make a little bit of money in this game 2 situation. The opportunities were there for the Edmonton Oilers. Did they maybe not realize how good Sergei Bobrovsky was at taking away most of the lower half of the net? Almost all of their chances ended up either missing the net or going low. And when a goalie's starting to cook like that and taking away all of those angles, you got to get the puck up. And that opportunities were there, and they will be there once again if the Edmonton Oilers bring that offensive energy that they did through the first 2 periods, and they put some pressure on the D-men that the Florida Panthers have, especially in their Oliver Ekman-Larssons of the world, Nico Mikkola, Brandon Montour, Forsling, Ekblad. Those are the solid 4. Really get on that bottom pairing. And also, I think the physicality has got to go up for this Edmonton Oilers team. They need to establish the body. 57 hits for the Florida Panthers in game 1 to 32 for the Edmonton Oilers. They got to make those D-men going back there for the puck think twice. Get some bodies going. I want to see Evander Kane. I know that he was dealing with injuries, but apparently he's healthy. He's got to throw his body around. He's got to be a difference maker with his physicality. However, none of those are angles that I'm talking about for my bets. So let's get to my same game parlay here for this Monday night beauty. I'm taking a look at the under 6.5. I'm teasing that up. I am a little bit concerned about the 5.5 if what I think happens and the Connor McDavid show starts to roll, because I could see this one easily being like a 3-2, 4-2, and then pop the empty netter or something crazy like that. Or the empty netter gets popped and it is 4-2. So I'm going to go with the under 6.5. That's my first pick. Obviously, seeing what Sergei Bobrovsky got done in game 1, it's easy to go with that in the same vein. Edmonton Oilers are going to bring it once again. I'm just going to go with the under 6.5, and we can thank me later. Leon Draisaitl, anytime point. They got to get the big German going. It was only a single game, but at this time of the NHL season, big guns got to go. And Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, we don't even need to talk about it. We know what they do in the offensive end. Connor McDavid, I would have also taken anytime assist, but there is absolutely no value in 1 assist for Connor McDavid at minus 265. So if you're not feeling that, go with Leon Draisaitl anytime point at minus 215. A little bit better, but in the same game parlay along with the under 6.5. And the Oilers on the money line, you're getting a nice payout at plus 310. So those are the 3 picks, and the lock of the night is Leon Draisaitl anytime point. The big German is going to get his tonight, and so will the Edmonton Oilers. They were all over opportunities in Bobrovsky early, and they need to bring that same energy that they did in game 1 in periods 1 and 2, and Draisaitl anytime point is going to bang. Put that along with the Edmonton Oilers on the money line and the under 6.5 teased up a bit. That's a plus 310 odd from our friends at FanDuel. And that's going to be hammer time, lock of the night, Leon Draisaitl, anytime point. I hope those all hit. I hope that this week is going to be a hit for the rest of y'all. Steele, like I said, back in the booth tomorrow. We got a top 20 D-Men fantasy countdown. We'll continue to bring you all the news from around the world of the NHL. We are a part of the Locked On Network, your team every single day. Make sure you're checking out that Locked On 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Smash that subscribe button. Much love for holding me down for Monday's episode. Another solo rip with your boy. We'll see you back in the booth for Tuesday's episode.